So futures are always asked, future getting better or worse, and as I mentioned just before, that depends. Depends on what. We know about cost of living indexes. A bunch of variables that are put in and tells you whether you're going to, inflation is going up or going down. And there's a way of integrating all those variables. What say the future does is it does the same sort of integrating the variables, but for a 10-year future. So we have to ask the question, if Montenegro is better in 10 years, what does that mean specifically? This question by itself is worth asking, even independently indexed. Montenegrins should have a conversation about what does it mean to be a better future. Does it mean just more GDP per capita? Does it mean more cars? Does it mean more PhDs? What does it mean? And have a consensus among the best as possible within the country of what does it mean for Montenegro to be better in 10 years, specifically. And that can be measured. Because the old saying is, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So if you want to manage to make a better future, then what are you going to measure? What variables would indicate this progress? So if somebody says, well, we want to be happier. Yes, okay, that's fine. How do you measure happiness? That's a big controversial question, and maybe you'll come up with a new answer that's better than others, but there's a big controversy worldwide about how to measure happiness. We infer it from a combination of other things. It doesn't prove happiness. How can these variables can be combined to show an overall direction of the country? One of the unique parts here of the State of the Future Index is it's not simply talking about a better education system or a better economy or a better health system, but the country as a whole. Just like in medicine, we have many doctors that look at specialties, but you also have some doctors that do the general diagnosis, how the whole body's working as a whole. So like the World Bank, you're supposed to be looking at economics. World Health is supposed to be looking at health. And the International Labor Organization is supposed to be looking at the labor conditions. Right? The State of the Future is supposed to look at the whole country. How do you analyze the whole country as a whole? And to know if that whole direction as a whole is getting better or worse. And what are the variables that make it better? Improving which variables will have the greatest impact on improving the overall economy, or not the overall country, I should mean economy. So let's say that you pick 20 variables, and you have people rate them and weight them and all of that through online questionnaires. And at the end of doing that, you calculate a little graph. Then we can make this transparent, publicly available, or the government can make it totally available to everybody, so that I can then take one of the variables and say, let's say I improve this variable 50%, but keep all the rest the same. How much more does this improve? And that gets an actual number, 10 years. Then I go back to where it was, and I take another variable, maybe I improve that one 50% or 30%. And keep doing with each one, which we call a sensitivity analysis. So then you would have a right to say, these variables we should invest more in, because they're going to have more of an impact on everything else. It gives another way to prioritize. Politics by itself will prioritize also, but this measure can give an additional way that more and more people can be involved in the prioritization. Can this be used to make policy prioritizations more objective? Maybe. Depends on how good the variables are, how many people are involved, and the integrity of the process. The State of the Future was invented by the Millenium Project to answer those questions. That's the purpose of the State of the Future Index. We do it for the whole world, and then we work with countries to do their own. Jose did some comparison ones in Latin America. Now you'll see a little philosophical different accents here. We think through this. I understand that countries like to compare each other. I understand that it's a motivation. Right? I understand all that. However, to make comparisons, all the variables have to be the same. Right? Now, water as a variable in Finland does not matter as much as water as a variable in Algeria. So comparison sophies are interesting, from my point of view, more entertaining and interesting. unless we can come up with some variables that everybody agrees upon. But that we've only done on a global basis as understanding the globe as a whole. Because then you can say, yes, a certain percentage of the whole world's got water problem, and therefore that's important to the whole world. That's important in Finland, so they don't get too many refugees, and so forth, right? So that makes sense. But then how do you do it as country comparisons? And with that, I would segue over to Jose, for he will give you an alternative view on country comparisons.
Yeah, well, I did this comparison in Latin America and also with North America, comparing the index for Canada and the USA. And obviously, we have to use the same parameters. And some parameters are not so important, in the USA or Canada as in Latin America, because Latin America is much poorer. Then GDP is more important for Latin Americans than for Canadians, for example. But anyway, I think it is very useful to compare. Like all the indexes actually compare all the other countries, but in one variable, or a few variables. Like the Human Development Index actually has three main variables. It has the income, GDP, it has education, which itself has two parameters, the number of years of school and the literacy rate, and then finally you have longevity. So the Human Development Index in itself is an index of three different categories, and one category has two sides. But then they compare the whole planet. And then you might say longevity is not so important in Japan because they already live 85 years, while in Congo they live 50 years. So it is more important for the people in Congo. But anyway, so I like to have the same comparisons, and then I like to compare Argentina with Brazil, with Mexico, and even with Canada and the USA. So I don't like single indexes for one country, because what does it mean an index for one country when you don't know how it ranks with the rest of the world?
Okay, so there's the Global State of the Future Index, which we have in the State of the Future report for this year. There are the comparison ones that Jose just mentioned. Then there's also individual ones for countries. The mayor of Seoul, South Korea, has just asked if we would be interested in doing a city State of the Future Index. So we may do one for Seoul. We'll see if that happens. And also, the mayor of Ljubljana expressed interest in doing a city thing. Now, a unique one would be a regional one. We've never done a regional one, because here comparisons might actually work out. There's enough similarity in the southeast. Because the city planner of Ljubljana, Jeanette in Vancouver, he's proposing to the European Union that they do a regional one here. And whatever countries want to participate, they do. If they don't want to participate, they don't have to. But that would be a regional one. That would be the first one. And here you have enough similarity, I think, it might make sense. We'll see. But the idea would be to ask, what are the variables for the whole region to be better? Scheduled to create the State of the Future Index. The draft is sent to me before. You can go through that in detail. We don't have to do it here, because the whole sequence of steps on that.